Good morning. I'm Judah. Those of you who don't know me, I'm the fourth son of Jacob and Leah. Yeah, I'm in the middle. I've struggled, though, for most of my life. I've struggled with the idea that supposedly we are the chosen people. But I have to tell you, my family is so dysfunctional, I just don't understand. On one hand, the stories I've heard. On the other hand, watching my family. Maybe I should give you a little background so you understand what I'm talking about. It starts out, we gather as a family in the evening around a fire or the meal, and we hear stories from Jacob, our dad. And the stories are about our heritage. First of all, he talks about God created the heavens and the earth and man. He talks about Adam and Eve and how because of Adam's failure to protect Eve when she was tempted by the serpent, sin was applied to him. But the blessing is there was a prophecy given to Eve that through her seed will be the King Redeemer. I don't know. It seems like we work awful hard for a living. It's been many generations. I don't understand when this Redeemer is. Is there any truth to the story, I wonder? A little later on in our heritage, we have another ancestor by the name of Noah. Again, God spoke to him and he created a boat, a big, huge ark. And in that ark, he was able to save all the animals and just his family. All the rest of mankind was perished because of the wickedness. And the story goes on that Noah suffered for 125 years to build this ark. Ridiculed, made fun of, all kinds of stuff. And then he was able to get off the boat because our family's the chosen, supposedly. I still don't see where maybe Noah was the Redeemer, but then why are we still struggling in life? Why is there still toil and sin? No, he can't be the King Redeemer. But he's in our family. So then we go on a little longer and we have Father Abraham. The whole world had gotten pretty wicked again. Chaos from the stories we're told. Chaos reigns, and out of Ur, Abraham is called. I don't know what that means. What do you mean, called? But as the story goes, he heard directly from God to leave where he was and become a nomad with the promise of having great multitude of descendants and great wealth and the promise of the land that he was standing on. Well, that hasn't come to be yet either. Makes you wonder, are we the chosen? So far, I'm thinking maybe we're the chosen laughingstock of the world, maybe. I don't know, I'm struggling with all this. But then there's also the story of Abraham way late in years, him and Sarah both, all of a sudden able to have a baby. Now, that makes no sense to me. Being a shepherd, I see how life comes to be. I see how it works. And there's a point in time, even in livestock, that they can't bear anymore. So how in the world did Abraham and Sarah have a baby? The story goes on that it was a miraculous gift from God that he was going to be, through his line, the Redeemer. Well, that was my grandfather, Isaac. And I'll have to be honest with you, although Isaac's a very nice man, I have a problem finding anything really unique or kingly or even any redeemer through him. In fact, he has two sons, twins. One, my father Jacob. The other is Esau. Now, as far as I know, I've never met the man Esau at this point. I don't know, I just hear stories, and him and Jacob didn't get along too good. From the stories, I understand Jacob actually ran away because not only did he con Esau out of his birthright, but he tricked Isaac into giving him the blessing. I wonder what that blessing was, because I sure don't feel blessed. Then as a real young kid, I would hear these stories, and I would try and figure out, how does this make us the chosen one, and how are we better than anybody else? I could see within our house the constant bickering and upheaval of not only my mom, but her sister Rachel, who I guess kind of was also my mom. I had a real problem here. We knew that there is a line for the Redeemer King, but being the fourth born, it would never be through me. It would have to be through Reuben, maybe, or maybe Simeon or Levi, but it would never make it down to the fourth son. And then all of a sudden there's bickering between the two moms, and they give their maidservants, and now there's 4 more of us. We're up to 8. And we're getting older now, and we're able to go out and watch the flocks and all that stuff. And I'm telling you, the bickering between us brothers of who's the one that's going to be blessed and who's going to be the one of the line of the Redeemer King, or maybe it's one of us. It was horrific. And then Mom had 2 more sons. We're up to 10. And then something kind of odd. I don't know how to explain it, but it was odd. After all these years, Rachel got pregnant. She bore a son. His name was Joseph. Now, in that, I have to explain to you that it's not just the bickering of my mom that's going on. We're living with my grandfather, Laban, who is a real shyster. He's conned my dad into 14 years of indentured service in order to get 2 wives that are making home miserable. We're the chosen. I don't quite get this. But then, Dad finally decides that maybe we need to separate from Grandpa. And then in that separation, maybe things would calm down a little bit. Well, Grandpa talked him into being a servant for some more, but at a price. Dad negotiated that we would do some livestock thing. The ones that are speckled and striped and colored brown would be separated. And those would become his, and as they prospered, he would still take care of Laban's flock. But through some kind of sleight of hand or whatever, the ones that we were in charge of, which Laban made sure we were in charge of our father Jacob's, and he moved us 60 miles away so that they couldn't intermingle, our herds kept growing bigger and bigger, and they kept being added from Laban's because his kept having speckled and striped by some weird coincidence. So we became wealthy. Laban's fortune was starting to dwindle. The funny thing then started to happen. We decided it's time to leave because Laban and his sons are starting to get a little upset with the fact of our prosperity. So, in the middle of the night, we pack up the whole multitude, livestock, all the brothers, and move. And leave. Well, Laban finds out and comes chasing us down. Talk about a childhood memory. Boy, was the tension thick when they caught us. Boy. So, Dad and Grandpa worked it out. We were able to leave and go on our way. And there was a pact made between them that they would never come back and embitter each other and fight for the sake of us, his grandkids. So we moved on. And as we were on our way to Bethel, Rachel got pregnant with a second child. His name became Benjamin. But in that, Rachel died in childbearing. So we buried her there on the path. And Dad was really, really depressed. I'd never seen him so depressed. In the meantime, our mom had a daughter by the name of Dinah. And she grew up, we all grew up. But in Jacob's grief, he took Joseph and he kept him very close to him, treated him special, to the point the rest of us boys were getting a little agitated. That's probably too mild of a word. Hatred was setting in is probably more like it. Every once in a while, Joseph would show up on the flocks for a little while, not having to do any of the work, but then he would leave. And then we found out what he was doing is he was going back and reporting to Dad what we were up to, which just infuriated us even more. Well, when we were in the land of the Hittites, we were a lot older now, and Dinah was a young woman. She went out to visit some of her friends of the Hittites. And the prince of the Hittites found her and saw her and raped her. That didn't sit well with us older four boys. That was our sister, full-blood sister. Didn't sit right. The prince came with his dad, and they tried to negotiate with Jacob a means in which he could marry Dinah. We were not in favor of this. We wanted blood. But Dad negotiated something and told him that basically the one condition would be that they would be circumcised, all the men. Well, we weren't happy with this, but Dad's the one in charge. Until Simeon and Levi came up with this plan. We were all in favor of it, but they went in on the second day after the circumcision and killed all the men, not just the king and the prince, but every single man in the village. Then the rest of us came in, all of us, including Joseph, came in and we plundered, took all the wealth out of the city, the livestock and the women and the children we took. So now our nation just grew huge. Dad wasn't very happy, though. He said we had made him very troubled in that area because he had given his word, and then we did this thing. And Simeon and Levi defended us by saying, they raped our sister. We had to do something. Meanwhile, as we're getting older, Joseph is being favored more and more and more all the time, favored all the time. He's even got a fancy coat. None of the rest of us get anything. Got this fancy coat to set him apart. Our hatred for this young man is just growing. I know he's kind of a half-brother or whatever you want to say, but he's arrogant. He loads it over us. In fact, let me tell you about this one time. We were there gathered as around the family meal, and he stands up and says, "Oh, I have a dream." And the dream goes like this. We were out making stocks. My stock stood up, and all of you 11 bowed down to my stock. We were enraged. A good thing that he was quick and ran, because I think we would have ended him right then and there. But he got away. But that's the arrogance this man had, this young man. Wasn't too long with Mom and Dad sitting there. He said he had another dream. In that dream, that not only did the moon and the sun bow down to him, but all 11 stars. My dad was even upset at this. Are you telling me that your mother and I are going to bow down to you? He said, no, that ain't going to be. Depart from us. Well, that just meant leave the dinner table. He never went anywhere. And yet, we were enraged to the point where we're thinking of different ways instead of bickering who's going to be the Redeemer King or the line of it. We were now plotting ways of how to get rid of Joseph. We were out watching the sheep one time, and here come the little spy. We knew Dad had sent him. You could recognize him from miles away because of his coat. There was no problem knowing who he was. So we came up with this plan. We were going to kill him. Well, Reuben stepped up and he says, no, let's just throw him into the pit until our anger cools a little bit, and then we'll figure out what to do with him. So we did. We threw him into the pit and decided then to make something to eat. We started out the meal rejoicing the fact that we finally figured out what to do with old troublesome Joseph. But then, I can still hear him today. The cries from the pit. Why are you doing this to me? I'm your brother. Help me. I can't tell you how agonizing that was. I happened to look up and see some traders coming down, Mennonite traders, headed to Egypt to trade their goods. And so I thought, hey, instead of risking having the wrath of God upon us because we killed our own brother, why don't we make a little money? So I talked everybody else into selling Joseph into Egypt. So we stripped him of his coat, worked out a deal, and for 20 pieces of silver, we got rid of our problem. This looks like a win-win deal to me. Except that voice as they're taking away Joseph. Brothers, help me. What have you done? I don't deserve this. Come rescue me. his cries. Really had me doubting whether we had done the right thing or not. But that was short-lived because Reuben came back and was all worried about, whoa, what are we going to do now? We got to figure out some way. Well, we had that worked out too. We took Joseph's coat and we covered it, killed the goat, covered it with blood, took it back to Dad and said, we don't know what happened. This is what we found. But we never expected the response of Jacob, our dad. He never really got done grieving Rachel's death. And now with Joseph as well, his grief just struck me to the core. A few months later, my mom took sick, and she died. We took my mom and we buried her in the family tomb. She was buried in the tomb with Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and now our mom Leah was buried there. But there's such sadness in me, I couldn't handle it. I couldn't be around my bickering brothers anymore or our family. And so I separated myself from hoping I could find peace. But as time went on, I took a wife. And we were blessed with 3 boys, Er, Onan, and Sheila. We had a pretty good life, and as they grew up to be young men, we were blessed to a degree. But the interesting thing that struck me is I knew through all of this time away from my family that they were the chosen ones, not me. And my oldest son, strong-willed, agitating, was not a very good young man. But we found a wife for him, and he took his wife, and he was very cruel and mean. And so he died. And so I went to my second son, Onan, and said, because of tradition in these times, you need to take Tamar as a wife. And in taking Tamar as a wife, the firstborn will be brought up in the honor of your brother. Well, I guess the heritage of my brothers and me and our relationships I passed on to our kids because Onan couldn't stand and in that, he refused to get Tamar pregnant. And in that, he died. I'm thinking maybe Tamar's a curse. That's what I'm thinking. So I decided, rather than give him our youngest Sheila, because he was still a young man, he wasn't quite to manhood and be able to marry, that I would send Tamar back to her family and wait. And she agreed. And so she left. And over time, Sheila grew up to be a good young man, God-fearing, actually better than me. But I was not going to let Tamar know. And then another grievous thing happened. My wife died. And I realized at that moment in time, I really had not fully got over losing my mom. Separated from the family, the loneliness. So I took the appropriate time to grieve and then decided that I cannot continue to do this for Sheila's sake. We needed to get back to work and watch our flocks. So that's what we did. And on the way there, unfortunately, I didn't travel with Sheila. I was with a friend. And to my shame, I had an urge that I needed scratched. And I came across this woman along the path. And I asked her if I could come into her. And she said, well, what would it cost? And he says, well, I said, I'll give you a young goat. And she goes, well, what will you give me in lieu until you can bring me the goat? And he says, I said, whatever you want. And she says, well, I'll take your signet, your cord, and your staff. I thought, okay. And I gave it to him. Went into her, and when I was done, I left. When we got to the herd and everything else, I separated a young goat, and I sent it with my friend to pay my debt and receive my staff and cord and signet. He went there and he couldn't find her. In fact, the whole community around that area said, no, there's no prostitute around this area, so it couldn't be here. So my friend brought the goat back, and I said, well, we tried. I guess we'll just let her keep the other things. Through time, about 3 months later, I hear that Tamar's pregnant. I'm thinking, what? How could that be? How could she disgrace my family in such a way? So I gathered up some of my men and we went after Tamar. We were going to kill her to disgrace the family in such a ridiculous prostituting way. When I got there, I sent for her. She didn't come. She sent a messenger and said, I am pregnant with the one that owns these. There's my staff. There's my signet. And there's my cord. So I said to Tamar that you're more righteous than me. Come. And I took her as my wife, never went into her again, but put her under my household. And in that turning point, I decided that I needed to go back to my family. And we moved everything back to be with Jacob and my brothers. And we lived peaceably as much as our family can for many years. Then famine hit the land. We kept moving around. We were nomadic. We could move from pasture to pasture. We knew where all the good ones were. We've been doing it for our whole life. But this famine was different. Everything was drying up and disappearing. Everything was gone. We were going to die. Finally, Dad said that, well, he had heard in Egypt that there is food that you can purchase. So he sent us boys down, all of us but Benjamin. He said, I'm not sending Benjamin because I cannot afford to lose another son. I'm thinking to myself, what of the rest of us? So we went down there, and we went before the guy in charge of distributing the food. And you know what was amazing? Is he seemed to know us. We haven't been to Egypt ever, and yet this guy seemed to know us. He was asking about whether our dad still lived and whether there was any more brothers. And then we were accused of being spies. We didn't like that. We were honest men. So we told him and tried to convince him that we were not spies. And he said, well, one of you stay behind. And then when you run out of food, this food that we're not letting you buy, you come back with your younger brother, and then I'll know that you're not spies. So Simeon was chosen to be left behind. The rest of us are headed home, and we're almost home. We happen to look into our sacks, and we find all of our money was placed in our sack. And we're thinking, oh, how in the world can we ever go back there? They're going to think we're not only spies, but thieves. And so we went back and confessed immediately to Dad what had gone on. Dad wasn't happy with us at all. Why in the world did you tell him about Benjamin? Well, he seemed to know, and he asked us all these questions. Maybe he wasn't going to at all give us grain. We had to answer them, and we answered honest and truthfully. And we can't appear before him again without Benjamin. Well, it came out that we ran out of grain, ran out of food. The only option is to go back to Egypt. Dad refused. You're not taking Benjamin. You're not taking him. If something happened to him, I will surely die. Well, Reuben said, well, how about we take him, and if anything happens to him, you can kill one of my sons. What? Over the time of me rejoining my family, I kind of had a soft heart for Benjamin. And so I told my dad, that I will guarantee Benjamin returns. And if not, it'll be me that takes the consequences. So finally, Dad realizes that if we don't go, we're all going to die. So he agreed to let Benjamin go. And we go there. We go to Egypt, and there in Egypt, what do we see? Nobody. We get to the steward, and he doesn't let us in to see the guy handing out grain. Instead, he sends us to this house. Now, we had packed not only our money, but we took another portion so that we could give back what we got before, so that he would think we were honest, not stealing money, but we would have enough to buy more grain. And we brought other things like nuts and things like that we were able to scrape up as a gift, hoping to win him over. And so we told the steward that led us over there that we got the money that was put somehow in our sacks. And the steward said, yeah, I know, I had the money. I'm the one that put it back. That made us pretty nervous. Is this a trap? Well, we were there kind of whispering to each other, has our sins finally come? Is this what God is finally holding us accountable for? And then out of the side corridor, here comes Simeon. Now, we're totally confused now. All of a sudden, we're ushered into a banquet hall. And the guy, there he is, the man in charge, and he says to him, sit down where I tell you. And he sets us in order of birth, all the way down to Benjamin. How in the world could he do this? We had a meal. It was pretty good. Benjamin had a lot more given to him than what we had, but that's okay. We packed up, and the guy said, take what you got and go back. And so we did. And on our way, we were overcome by the steward and some soldiers, and we were told, hey, one of you stole the chalice in which the overseer drank from. We said, no, we're honest people, nobody. If you find a chalice in our bags, then you can kill the one that you find it in. The rest of us will be your slaves. They went through the bag, starting with the oldest, all the way down, and our hearts sunk as they found the chalice in Benjamin's sack. Oh, how are we going to do this with Dad? And so the steward says, well, we're taking Benjamin back. I said, no, we're all going back. That was the deal. We went back there. And they were going to enslave Benjamin. And I went before the overseer and said, do not do that. Take me instead. And I explained to him the situation with the dad and the terms in which we had to do that just to be able to get here and get food, that if Benjamin doesn't return, my dad will surely die, and it'll be upon my head. Please take me instead and let the others go. All of a sudden, the overseer tells everybody to get out of there but us. And then, the shock of our life, he reveals to us that he's Joseph. What? Now I know. We're doomed. We're doomed. We all are backing off. We're up against the wall, just scared what's going to happen next. I'm looking for the soldiers to come in from any direction. And he said, no, don't worry. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And we had this great time of weeping and forgiveness. It blew my mind away. And then I thought, Joseph, wow. He must be the King Redeemer. Oh. Joseph arranged for us to go and get Dad and bring him here. He told us we could come there and stay, and he'd take care of us. He told us that he'd give us the prime land for our herds down in Goshen. And when Pharaoh heard that Joseph's family were there, he was all in favor of it too. And so we ran back. Long trip, but we went in a very fast pace with carts to bring Joseph and the children and came back. As we were approaching back, Dad said to me, Judah, you go on ahead. You talk to Joseph and you find out where Goshen is. And you figure out how do we get there. And so I did. I went, found the way, got there, got the whole family there. And then sent word to Joseph that we were there. And he came down with great celebration to see his dad. I had never seen Dad so happy. And then Jacob died. And we took Jacob, because he told Joseph that he wanted to be buried with his ancestors. So we took him to there, and he was buried with the family thought. He said he wanted to be buried with Leah. I led the company back to Goshen. And it was there that I lived out my days. And I died and was buried there. I have always struggled with Judah. One, the main part that he's mentioned is a chapter stuck right in the heart of talking about Joseph. It just seemed the most bizarre place for me. Why there? And it's just there, and then it jumps right back to Joseph. Didn't realize that Judah, all of the brothers, all of them, they didn't have the luxury that we do with the written word. Didn't exist yet. The only knowledge of God that they had was through the stories that were told around the family dinners or the campfire or however they were done. The other thing that struck me in Judah is, where was the turning point? Where was the point in which he started being more loyal and following God than he was moving away and trying to distance himself? Doesn't seem to be any one defining moment. And then I realized that there's nobody sitting in this room or standing in the back that hasn't had the same beginning, doubts, wondering. Maybe you were raised in church, heard all the stories, but there's still, when you look around the world, you wonder, until you came to the point of a decision. You see, the Holy Spirit worked different back then. It was conviction from the outside, where we have the privilege of being, once we believe, of having it convicted from the inside. The other thing that struck me as interesting with Judah is we call them the Jews nowadays. Why is that? Because they're associated with the tribe of Judah, the last tribe to be conquered. I found it interesting, too, that the relationship between Judah and Benjamin, when they were divided up the land, their two lands were together. And when the nation of Israel split into two parts, 10 tribes became Israel. 2 tribes became Judah, Benjamin and Judah. And the last thing that struck me as interesting is not knowing how this chosen thing worked. They were thinking of a king redeemer, not realizing that the whole story that we read has nothing to do with these people as much as it is the process of God taking care of and protecting the redeeming seed, which is in the line of Judah. And the last thing I would like to say is we've been hearing things about who should be an elder and the qualifications and things like that. And I find it interesting in the story of Judah that God takes this man who struggled in so many different areas early on and uses him to be in the line. And at the end, he is the go-to guide. And if you go on to the other stories, when they finally get delivered from Egypt, who leads the nation of Israel out of Egypt but Judah? And so when you put that together with the issue of eldership, pastors have been trying so hard to say, you can't go by what the past is. You have to go by the character that they now are after the Holy Spirit has worked on them for a period of time. And so the qualifications, remembering in those letters that the churches really knew that almost every one of them that would be speaking about had a life like Judah or a past in the past. Just would like to share that with you. Thanks.